Truth is, despite the hype in Paris, the fact is there's no such thing as man-made climate change. Yeah, the truth is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of the United Nations is a political, not a scientific body, and it even amends scientific documents before publication to conform to diplomatic niceties.
It's getting hot in here, so take off all your clothes. I am getting so hot.
The climate alarmism plastering the media and the so-called science put forward by the United Nations is fraudulent. And what Sir David Attenborough says is a disgrace to science, and we challenge him to open debate. And one thing we would ask him is, just look at this graph. The upper curve is what their UN models predict, and you can see they fail and fail and fail again to show what really is happening in the world. The world now is cooling, and our own scientific examination of solar activity shows it will cool even more rapidly in the next 20 years. When it comes to CO2 emissions, they're failing on their own terms. They're actually not cutting them, but exporting them. They closed the British steel industry to reduce CO2 in Britain, and it's regrown in India to make more CO2. This is absurd. We've lost jobs. So let's be clear, the climate change energy charges on your electricity bill are actually a poll tax on the poor, which even causes people to die in winter when they cannot foot the bill. So why is it happening? Follow the money. Huge profits have been made from carbon trading, from expensive climate change grandiose projects. Big oil benefits from price rises, banks benefit from any trading, you do not. Ice cream, tea, coffee, French baguette, we got it all here. Now is the time to start full debate in Britain on the future of the climate change story. It's a con and must be closed down. That's all for today.
And from the Piccadilly Whip ice cream stall in Tower Hill to the politically whipped here in Westminster. Piers Corbyn, welcome to the programme. Now,
Good to be here.
Surely for you to be right, nearly all the world's leaders, from the President of America to the President of China, plus most of the world's climate scientists, are engaged in a massive conspiracy to hoodwink us. That can't be right.
Well, of course, most of the climate scientists, you say, but that isn't true. Of this so-called survey of climate scientists of 12,000 papers, only 0.3% of them actually stated that they, from their work, that man CO2 had been the cause of warming. The other papers said nothing at all, including papers
But
by
most
myself.
of the world has signed on to this. All the leaders have their own scientific advisors. Although they argue about what to do.
No, they're appointed. You see, it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They appoint people to advise themselves. The IPCC is a political organisation, not a scientific organisation.
Why could so many people be hoodwinked, and why?
Well, it's easily done, and it has been done before. There's many things in the past which have been untrue and believed, such as, Galileo had a problem bringing forward the truth. John Harrison had a problem bringing forward the truth for 30 years about how to measure latitude. For 10 years, people didn't believe that, or believed that continental drift was impossible because of the entrenched interest groups. And if you want to know what is actually going on, we can tell you. But that graph I showed shows that the theory they put forward is not working. So under the Climate Change Act, Section 6, Part 2, it states very clearly that if the science changes, i.e. information changes, then the measures have to change and should be discussed. So what's saying is we have to reopen the debate on climate change and actually not impose these charges which are closing British steel.
But you claimed in your take there that the world is now cooling.
Yes.
But that's not borne out by either the land or the satellite temperature measurements,
It is.
it?
It is.
Not
Look at the
not
graph.
up till
Look
now.
at the graph again. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
But the past, I mean,
No,
temperatures
well, look at the
now.
graph. The graph you
temperatures
just
now.
seen shows that.
Temperatures now are, on average, about 0.5 degrees above where they were 35 years
yeah.
ago. But people argue about
No,
a
no.
pause.
There's
but certainly
0.5
we've had-
degrees of fraud, and you can find that on the website.
But that's all the satellite measurements I know show
No, no,
that the
no.
temperature's
The
been right.
satellite
No, there's an
measurements-
argument about
Not the satellite measurements. So-called land measurements show an increase, but they are fraudulently chosen because they change the data sets on the way through. And you can go on the weatheraction.com website and see this, or many other
But we've
scientific
had
papers.
since, I mean, people argue about a pause, whether that's there, or how long it will last. But since,
pause, okay.
since 1997-98, we've had some of the warmest years on
Oh,
record.
we had some very warm years, yes.
So how
But
can it be called-
the
how can it be
average,
called
average
cooling?
in the last, the peak, the recent peak is the same as, taking away the data fraud, the same as the peak in the in the 1940s.
Michael, you're a bit of a skeptic.
Yes.
Your
We-
position is at the extreme end, though, of skepticism. I mean, it's really denial. It's not just There are even climate scientists who can disagree about the exact temperature
Oh, yeah.
consequences of CO2.
A sort of a
and
lukewarmist
on-
position,
on-
as it's
right, but that's not yours. You're effectively in outright denial.
Well, we're saying that the CO2 has no effect whatsoever, and that is borne out by history. If you look at history, CO2 levels follow changes in temperature, not the other way round. And that is because the temperature of the sea controls the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Because the sea itself has got 50 times more CO2 in it than the atmosphere. So the sea surface temperature controls how much goes in and